Well, the price we pay, Jehovah's Witnesses appeal, day number 6. So we're on day number 6 for the appeal. It's held in Norway, and if you look at the picture, everyone, all these ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, they all look happy. They're smiling, laughing. So let's see, they probably all had a statement today. Let's see what they said. Okay, Oslo, Norway. This is the 6th day of the Jehovah's Witness appeal against the state of Norway. And today's remaining witnesses are former Jehovah's Witnesses, detailing their experiences with disfellowshipping and shunning. And over the weekend, more former Jehovah's Witnesses met together to show their support for the ones testifying in the appeal. We send our love and support as well. Below are some photos sent to AvoidJW. Okay, so here's some of the pictures of all the ones that were supporting. We're there. To put names, no. Hi, remember me, Modican villain. I lost my family, religiously mandated shunning. Wow. That's quite the statement on a billboard. So, witness number 7. Witness number 7 is Rakel from Dagen newspaper on February 10th. It said that you're free to join other religions, but if I had, I would have been disfellowshipped anyways. Rakel, a 27-year-old nurse, grew up in a Jehovah's Witness family where everyone was involved in the faith. Her father was an elder, and their home hosted book studies. We had 2 meetings and a book study every week. Participation was expected, she explained. As a child, she had worldly friends, but over time she was encouraged to cut them off. At 14, she became an unbaptized publisher, and by 17, she was baptized. Most young people in my congregation were baptized early. It was expected, she said. However, her baptism happened under extreme circumstances. While she was hospitalized for an eating disorder, the doctors didn't think I was competent to consent, but they took me out of the hospital to baptize me anyways. She felt pressure to go through with it. If I didn't get baptized, I would be excluded from my friend group. And shamed by elders. Rakel was summoned to a judicial committee for having friends outside of the faith. Her Jehovah's Witness friends threatened, if you don't report to the elders, we will. And when she did, the elders questioned her actions. They asked if I had done enough to prevent what happened. I knew my conscience was clear, but they treated me like I was in the wrong. She was advised to drink less in front of worldly people and think about the clothes I wore. And she felt they were making her feel guilty. She eventually married and became pregnant, but felt like leaving the religion before her child was born. My maternal feelings became very strong. I realized I had to be prepared to turn my back on my child, and that would ruin our relationship from the start. She then wanted to separate from her abusive husband, but the elders had no understanding. They made things difficult when she was in an abusive marriage, and they didn't want me to marry, and once I did, they only wanted to meet with me if my husband was present, because he was my head. And that made it nearly impossible to get help. She eventually became a single mother and a full-time student. The father didn't get custody. And during COVID, she distanced herself. I was inactive for a year. I didn't say it out loud, but in my heart, I had a farewell with my family and friends because I knew they would distance themselves. She set the date and sent the text to an elder to officially resign. I didn't believe in Jehovah's Witnesses anymore. I believed in a more loving God with room for more than I experienced. And after leaving, she lost contact with all her JW friends. She says, I was part of a nationwide friend group, but none of them have reached out. And her relationship with her parents also changed drastically. We were a close-knit family. We traveled a lot. I used to talk to my mother every day. But now, none of that. She sees her twin sister only by shopping in the pet store where she works. Otherwise, we have no contact. And her younger brothers, who are 15, aren't baptized but still follow the rules. They were young when I left, but were raised in the same system. Rakel struggles to understand why she's shunned. I still have values similar to those of Jehovah's Witnesses, so why can't we have contact? So her mother texts her once in a while, once or twice a month. She says she loves me and my son and thinks about us daily, and I believe her. But her parents wanted her to gradually leave so they could maintain contact. And it said that you're free to join other religions, but if I had, I would have been disfellowshipped anyways. The traumatic aftermath. Rakel was admitted to the hospital for self-harm and anorexia while she was a Jehovah's Witness, not after. She became inactive and the elders reached out, which she saw as an attempt to bring her back. Risdale downplayed her experience as more discomfort, but Rakel was clear. I resigned because I was against the disfellowshipping policy. It was my initiative, but I knew withdrawing meant I would be disfellowshipped. And Rakel believes she would have gone back if not for her non-JW friends who became like family. It was too tough to stand alone. And Risdale suggests that she has new friends now, but Rakel pushed back. It's not the same. I started from scratch because I had 0 worldly friends after middle school. Witness number 8, Leander Leander Joan in Oslo, Norway. Photo from Dagen newspaper, February 10th. He says, I had a choice between suicide and leaving Jehovah's Witnesses. Leander Joan, 43, from Odda, was born into a deeply entrenched Jehovah's Witness family with both sides of his family in the religion since the 60s. He had no contact with his only worldly relative, his grandfather. His older brother remains a Jehovah's Witness with his family. Leander describes the exhausting routine of JW life, daily meetings, field service, preparations, and study. There was no free time, no friendships with non-JWs were only allowed for preaching purposes. At 16, just 1.5 years after baptism, he realized he was trapped. He started becoming skeptical when friends were summoned before Jehovah's Witnesses Judicial Committee. He was forced to describe detail to 4 or 5 elder brothers now how they engaged in oral sex and other intimate acts, combined with social control he experienced. He developed serious mental health issues. He says, I wanted to end my life at 16, but fortunately I started at a folk high school when I was 17. That saved me. Feeling hopeless, he considered suicide, believing that leaving the religion or dying would both result in losing everything. His family, preoccupied with caring for a disabled sibling, never received help from the congregation, leaving a lasting impression on him. A scripture led him to question the elders, but instead of answers, he was scorned. He tried to separate himself from the organization, but the elders persistently visited him for 6 months. Desperate to stop it, he wrote letters demanding they leave him alone. His family, though, preferred to distance themselves. And once, when he tried to visit family in his hometown, his parents, grandparents, siblings, uncles, and aunts all left in a boat to avoid meeting him. It was absolutely absurd, he said, about the experience. After moving to a folk high school for an arts program, he stopped submitting field service reports, signaling to the congregation that he was drifting away. And the elders continued visiting him, trying to bring him back, and eventually he moved to Oslo to escape the harassment, believing they would have never stopped if he had stayed in Odda. He emphasized that there is no difference between those who resign and those who are disfellowshipped, ostracized, and dehumanized. What an experience. Witness number 9, Jan Frode Nielsen. Being disfellowshipped, non-personal relationships is the root cause of my suffering. Jan Frode Nielsen, 47, grew up in a Jehovah's Witness family with his parents and siblings practicing faith. And though no extended relatives were involved, his childhood was dominated by religious activities, attending meetings, studying, and engaging in field ministry. He had no time for sports or other extracurriculars. His social interactions were strictly limited to fellow witnesses, making him increasingly isolated as he grew older. At 12 or 13, he became an unbaptized publisher. Adhering to the rigid rules, he recalled that disfellowshipping was an accepted part of life. Losing friends to disfellowshipping was familiar, but not something he dwelled on until it became personal. And judicial committees were taught as part of a regular instruction. They seemed distant until he was directly affected. And at 17, Jan was baptized, became highly active in the faith, serving as an auxiliary pioneer. However, at 20, he faced a crisis leading to depression. He married at 23, had 3 children, which made him question his faith. And he struggled with the idea of indoctrinating his children and found it morally wrong. His last Kingdom Hall meeting was in 2012 or 2013 when his youngest child was 2. And he told his wife he would never return, though he remained inactive for years. He followed the rules to avoid repercussions. In 2012, at 34 years old, he participated in a judicial committee, which he found shocking. He expected a compassionate discussion but instead encountered a rigid, rule-driven process. He lacked access to procedural materials like the Shepherding the Flock book, leaving him unprepared for what he experienced. Struggles with leaving and mental health. Jan attempted to distance himself quietly, hoping to maintain a connection between his children and their JW family. However, the stress of this balancing act severely impacted his health. He fell seriously ill, requiring hospitalization and 3 years of intensive therapy. He received no support from the JW community, which treated his struggles with indifference. The final break came in 2019 when he publicly spoke out against the JW organization. Initially, he remained anonymous behind the name Frederick, but when he revealed his identity, he was labeled an apostate and wholly shunned. In an interview with Vartland, he discussed the organization's stance on voting, showing that he had never participated in elections due to the faith's strict rules. And his mother responded to his public revelation with the text, "I cannot and will not have contact with an apostate," and his entire family cut ties. Disfellowshipping and consequences. In January 2020, 2 JW elders confronted him at his home. They asked him to attend a judicial committee as he was about to take his dog for a walk. He refused. They then asked if he still identified as a Jehovah's Witness. The following day, his disfellowshipping was officially announced. Imagine that. Confronted him when he was walking his dog. He expressed sadness over his parents' rejection, believing they view him as a useless son, and he never intended to hurt them and hoped for some level of contact. Since 2019, he has spoken to his mother only once. His father called him once, 2 years ago, after his grandmother's passing, and he was invited to the funeral but felt unable to attend. And when he finally saw his mother in 2022 or 2023, she clung to him, expressing deep sorrow and telling him she thought about him daily. However, despite their love, they continued to follow the JW doctrine and maintain distance. Becoming a whistleblower. Jan Frode emphasized that his decision to speak out was not about opposing JW beliefs, but exposing organizational misconduct. He noted that Jehovah's Witnesses frequently misrepresent their policies in the media, prompting him to correct misinformation. What does the literature say about this? Was the phrase he heard constantly growing up. Rules always precede personal judgment. And he recounted a case where his parents stepped down as an elder and pioneer simply because their child was disfellowshipped, illustrating the severe social consequences of maintaining contact with former members. So the JW doctrine dictates that only necessary contact, such during funerals or severe illness, is permissible. And since leaving, Jan has faced increased scrutiny from the JW organization. He explained that those who quietly leave may still receive polite acknowledgement on the street, but those who speak out like him are met with hostility. He became a local politician, channeling his energy into advocacy and community service, and he believes his treatment has been harsher because he refuses to stay silent. Watchtower lawyer Risdell attempted to link Jan's mental health struggles to his divorce, an argument he strongly refuted. And being disfellowship, not personal relationships, is the root cause of my suffering. He goes on to how he required years of therapy to recover from the institutionalized mentality imposed by the JW organization. And in 2018, he was referenced anonymously as Frederick in an article about Jehovah's Witnesses. And when Russia cited this article, it reinforced his fear that his children might grow up getting baptized and be forced to shun him in the future. This is Jan Nilsson's third time testifying against the Jehovah's Witness organization. As before, his testimony highlights the emotional and psychological toll of being raised in a high-control religious environment. And his story exemplifies the consequences of disfellowshipping and the struggles of those who leave the faith, particularly when they choose to challenge its practices publicly. And there's a picture of them in the court. Witness number 10, Noomi. And that's Noomi right there. Jan Nielsen is the first person, Noomi and Rakel before the appeal. So that's Rakel. We heard her testimony. Okay, so I haven't had normal contact with my parents or former friends in the faith since leaving, Noomi. Noomi, 28, grew up in northern Sweden in a Jehovah's Witness JW household. Her parents were devout members. Most of her family belonged to the faith. She had two older brothers, one 18, another 4 years older. Her childhood was structured strictly around religious obligations, 3 weekly meetings, daily Bible readings, and complete social isolation from non-witnesses. She attended a congregation of approximately 100 members and could only interact with fellow Jehovah's Witnesses. At 10 years old, Rakel became an unbaptized publisher, a significant step in the faith. By 13, she underwent baptism, a decision she felt pressured into making. She described it as a sheep hunted by a dog into a fence, implying she had no choice but to comply. I felt like I wouldn't be socially accepted among friends if I didn't. And she then suffered from the death anxiety, fearing that not getting baptized would lead to her perishing. The trauma of disfellowshipping. When Noomi's older brother at 17 got a girlfriend and was disfellowshipped, it marked a traumatic period in her life. She developed anxiety and the family dynamics drastically changed. He became a stranger living in the house, she testified. As he was shunned, he eventually moved in with his girlfriend. Despite feeling afraid of him, Noomi believed she was doing the right thing by severing ties. She had been taught that the worldly people, the non-Jehovah's Witnesses, were under demonic influence, reinforcing her belief that distancing herself was an act of spiritual obedience. Between 16 and 17, Noomi moved to Fosk, northern Norway, where her parents had relocated to support a smaller congregation, which was seen as a noble duty within the faith. However, she found it increasingly difficult to conform to the strict religious lifestyle. Eventually, she became romantically involved with someone leading a double life, not considered a good Jehovah's Witness example. And when it was reported that they had been alone together, she was summoned by the elders. She recounted being terrified, knowing she risked disfellowshipping. During the meeting, she confessed everything and expressed deep remorse. Instead of immediate expulsion, she was publicly reproved, and then an announcement in the congregation was made that she had been disfellowshipped. At 18, Noomi could no longer maintain the lifestyle she had enjoyed as a witness. The elders visited her home unannounced, informing her that she had been disfellowshipped. She recalled feeling overwhelming despair, knowing she was about to lose everything. My mother and I were just in tears, she said. I knew I would lose everyone I cared about. She moved in with a new boyfriend but lacked a support system. The relationship was abusive, and she found herself moving from one unstable situation to another to have a place to live. And at 17, she had already sought help from child services due to her father's physical and mental abuse, but she felt they did not understand her situation and failed to assist. And after her disfellowshipping from the JW community, the JW community treated her as if she were dead, and she described how no one reached out, leaving her isolated and vulnerable. And the organization's doctrine discourages higher education, leaving Noomi disadvantaged after leaving the faith. She struggled to rebuild her life, dealing with PTSD and years of hardship before finally receiving psychiatric help. And she worked hard to return to school and eventually pursued an education. Family estrangement and her current situation. It's been 11 years since Noomi last had a meaningful contact with her family. The relationship remains cold and distant, and the only interactions have occurred in emergencies, such as when she was hospitalized. Her parents have no relationship with their grandchildren. And when asked why she does not allow her parents to have contact with their grandchildren, she stated, "I want my kids to have free will and unconditional love." And she expressed that by maintaining the distance, she is protecting them from an unhealthy relationship similar to what she experienced. And during the testimony, discrepancies arose regarding her baptism age, and the prosecution, Risdale, presented information suggesting she was 16 rather than 13 at baptism. Noomi maintained that this was a mistake. The prosecution also stated that she was disfellowshipped after 3 strikes, and they questioned whether she knew the rules prohibiting men and women from being alone together. And she acknowledged that she knew but struggled to adhere to the strict regulations. And regarding whether her parents had ever taken care of her children, she confirmed that they had babysat one grandchild once when she gave birth to her second child, but otherwise they were not involved. When asked if recent changes in the organization's rules had affected her situation, she responded, "Nobody is calling me, and nothing has changed in my family situation." And despite policy updates, she remains estranged from her family, and their relationship has not improved. Noomi. So that's Noomi right there. Okay, so we move over to witness number 11, Tony Zane, and he's a former circuit overseer. Tony Zane, witness 11. Okay, so this was done through Zoom on February 10th, 2025. And he says, "You never know how people will react, and we had to determine if someone was truly remorseful, sometimes ruining a person's life by disfellowshipping them." Tony Zane, 40, from Bergen, Norway, grew up in a strict and conservative Jehovah's Witness JW family, surrounded by parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and a sister who was disfellowshipped in her early 20s. He described his childhood as fully immersed in JW activities with no room for extracurriculars. A normal week was full of meetings, field service, and other religious duties, he testified. He briefly tried football but was forced to quit when his father disapproved. And at age 12, he became an unbaptized publisher, taking on more responsibilities like reporting field service. The pressure to get baptized intensified, and at 16 he did so, partly because he believed it would allow him to pet the tigers in paradise. From a young age, he feared punishment from God. Nothing could make me be sinful because I feared that God would kill me if I did not obey. And he also believed that without baptism, he wouldn't be saved during Armageddon. Confrontation with elders. Around 16 to 17, the elders summoned him to confess a wrongdoing. His parents were informed, and he found the process shameful and embarrassing. Although he wasn't disfellowshipped, he recalled the overwhelming fear of losing everything. That first meeting still haunts me today. It was terrifying. He later moved from Bergen to Grimstad, got married young, as is common among people in the faith, and lived there for 18 years. Rising in the ranks, he became an elder, a circuit overseer, someone Jehovah's Witnesses deeply trust. However, he dreaded judicial committees, saying you never know how people will react, and we had to determine if someone was truly remorseful, sometimes ruining a person's life by disfellowshipping them. And he confirmed that the rules of this organization apply equally to minors and adults, recounting an incident where two children who got drunk had their punishment announced publicly. One of them wasn't even baptized, but still faced ridicule, he said. Wow. And over time, he grew critical of the teachings, feeling that much of the literature was propaganda. He witnessed physical and mental abuse and sensed a lack of love within the congregation. There was so much judgment and backstabbing, I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand by it anymore. And by 2007, he started questioning the organization's doctrine, but fear of consequences kept him inside until 2024. Jehovah's Witnesses don't like critical thinking, he stated. He eventually stepped down as an elder, requested the removal of his data, and left his congregation in Hamar. Despite not being officially disfellowshipped, he has been treated as such. Nobody reached out to me. I lost everything. His attempts to reconnect with Pimo, physically and mentally out friends, were unsuccessful. The consequences of leaving. His departure had devastating personal costs. His 15-year-old daughter, who was recently baptized, cut all contact. I last spoke to her in April last year. I sent texts, but she never answers. He even needed police intervention to stop elders from harassing him. When asked about JW's supposed new, more lenient policies, he dismissed them. It's like putting makeup on a pig. Nothing has really changed. Despite having legal custody, he struggles to see his daughter because she refuses contact. Jehovah's Witnesses believe they are entitled to do what they want, thanks to the governing body, he stated. And he is trying to rebuild his life, but the scars remain. He says, I lost everything, even though I was never officially disfellowshipped. Imagine that, a circuit overseer. Well, that's a good testimony from a circuit overseer, former circuit overseer, elder. Well, the closing comments, based on the testimony shared today, a clear and painful pattern emerges, one of control, fear, and profound personal loss. These stories are isolated experiences and part of a larger reality for those who leave the Jehovah's Witnesses. The common thread of childhood indoctrination, the pressure to conform, and the devastating consequences of questioning or leaving the faith highlight a system that prioritizes obedience over individual well-being. Many have spoken out about the trauma of judicial committees, the fear of being disfellowshipped, and the emotional toll of being cut off from family and friends. One witness described the terrifying moment of facing elders, feeling like his entire life could be taken from him in an instant. Another shared how he was treated as if he no longer existed without official disfellowshipping. And parents have lost children, children have lost parents, not because of wrongdoing, but because of rigid belief system that discourages critical thinking and enforces absolute loyalty. Yet despite the pain, there is also resilience. Those who have spoken out today have shown immense courage in breaking the silence. And their testimonies serve as a powerful reminder that the right to question, the right to think freely, and the right to choose one's own path should never come at the cost of losing everything. And to those still trapped in fear, to those struggling with doubt, and to those who have lost loved ones to this system, know that you are not alone. There is a life beyond control, and there is a healing beyond loss, and there is hope beyond the walls that once confined you. So that brings an end to day 6, the appeal. And this is a great day for the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, the former Jehovah's Witnesses. They got to tell their story in court. And boy, is it different than the lies that the real Jehovah's Witnesses told in court. So it shows that there's a big contrast. So now we get to see how is the court going to deal with all of this. Okay, folks, well, if you're in the religion, get out, and then it's way easier to live your life with love. Because when you're in there, you cannot live your life with love. You cannot love people. You cannot talk to people. There's all these rules that are about judicial rules. It's like their elder book is full of judicial rules. Love, the word love is only in there 5 times. They don't practice love. So you have to get out. Once you get out, you can practice love on a daily basis. You can talk to worldly people. You'll find that there's a lot of good worldly people out there, and they're people. And we get these words out of our vocabulary, worldly, all of this stuff, and they're just people. There's all kinds of wonderful people out there. And that's how we can live our life with love. Okay, folks, well, that's the end of the video. We'll see you on the next video, day 7. We'll look forward to that. And have a great day. Bye for now.